for a Jewish holiday. But the way it usually went is you would just leave their body to rot. And first, I don't want to be too gross, but I think it's important every once in a while to think about this. First it would be the maggots. And then it would be the crows and the vultures. And then as body parts start falling on the ground, it's the dogs and the rats and the ants. And that was the message. Visual, auditory, you could smell it. It tells you, here's how we're going to have peace in the world. That if anybody resists this domination story, you're going to rot in public, naked. But what does Jesus do? The gospel says Jesus goes to the cross. And in this way, God says, I'm bringing a kingdom that doesn't come through violence and domination. I'm bringing a kingdom that comes through sacrifice and love and forgiveness and mercy. I'm bringing a new story into the world, not domination, revolution, purification, isolation, or anything else. I'm bringing a story, and it's a story of reconciliation and forgiveness and love and embrace and acceptance. And that, brothers and sisters, is the good news. It's not the narrative of violence and domination. It's the narrative of Jesus' different story that the world comes through a community of people who join God in the ministry of reconciliation and peace and justice and love. And so, when I think about the future of faith, I honestly think that a lot of faith is going to just keep doing what it's been doing. It's going to back domination narratives and revolution narratives and isolation and purification narratives. And frankly, I hope that that kind of faith, more and more people become atheists in regard to. But my hope is that maybe beginning with people like us, more and more of us are going to say there's got to be something better than the stories being given to us by most of our religious communities. And maybe we're going to go back and open Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We're going to listen to Jesus. And we're maybe going to find ourselves saying, you know what? He was right. This is the story we should live by. This is the good news. This is the evangelia that we really need. And that when that new framing story, the story of the good news of the kingdom of God is rooted in our hearts, and then we start to express it. Sure, in songs and in sermons and in prayers, but you know where we really have to express it? In the prosperity system, the equity system, and security system. We express it in businesses, and we express it in classrooms, we express it in works of art, and works of sculpture, and works of civil engineering. We express it in good laws and in good policies. We start expressing it through all of these dimensions of life. And brothers and sisters, I believe that is what is, wherever we see good happening in the world, it's because that good news of the kingdom of God is at work in people's hearts and lives. And that's a good place for me to stop. And we've got some time for some questions and comments and discussion. And are we going to have some people with mics? Or maybe this is the mic that we're going to have going around. But I'd love to have some questions. How about we'll do this? If you can talk loud enough for me to hear you, I'll repeat your question so everybody else can hear it. And if you've got a question, comment, pushback, response, if you just want to tell me, here's how I feel about what you just said, I'd love to hear that. And just to get the ball rolling, I want to make sure that we have women and men asking questions in roughly equal numbers. So our first question has to be from someone of the female gender, and our second from a male. And I've got a present to give to the first two people who ask questions. So while you're thinking of your question, I won't tell you what the present is. But okay, what's your question? You want the present first. Oh,
if we know that the solution to like the four crises to inhabit
Yeah. Oh, what a great question here. Choose one of these two. The question is, if we get what you're saying, she took both of them. Okay, there you go. If we sort of get this, how do we spread that message? And what a good question. What's your name? Randy. Randy, that's a great question. You get both of them. But Randy, I think this is what the early followers of Jesus were doing. What we call evangelism, we've interpreted evangelism to mean how do we get people to sign on to the Christian religion and maybe say a sinner's prayer. We have different ways. But I think this is what they really meant when they talked about evangelism. And they were interested in inviting people into this life. I think probably the two things that we've got to do, it's such a good question, but let me mention two things. I think the first thing is we have to get involved living this out in some way. Some ways that become visible in our lives. And when we're living it out in some way, I think it's very easy to talk about it because people are curious and interested. I'll just give you a quick example from when I was in my 20s. And I got married when I was 26, and my wife and I got involved. We knew that the good news of Jesus called us to not just care about the poor, but to know the poor, to know poor people. And in our area, there was an apartment complex that was all refugees, and it was the poorest place in our whole area. So we got involved with people in this apartment complex. And we got involved, we took people into our home, and we met people and all the rest. And so everybody was really poor. So, and this, I'm not saying this is the smartest thing to do, but it's what we did. We started collecting clothes. And we would fill up a huge pickup truck with clothes. And we'd go into this neighborhood, and we would put clothesline between the trees in the parking lot. And we would just drape all the clothes over the trees. And then we'd run into the apartments on a Saturday and knock on doors and say, free clothes in the parking lot. And within like 10 minutes, hundreds of people are streaming out of and it was like this amazing sale at Kmart or something, but it didn't cost anything. And everybody runs out and people are trying on, holding up clothes. And we created this big free thing. It was so much fun. It was a great experience. But then when word started getting out about this, everybody in our little church who was involved with this, all their neighbors would start saying, hey, we heard about that thing they're doing with the clothes. We brought some for you. And pretty soon we were like sick of clothes. They were filling up our homes. But it was so interesting because when they saw us doing something, they were really interested in talking to us about why. And one of our problems when we think about the subject of evangelism is we're very often telling people to do something or telling people about something, but we're not doing anything about it. And so those would be a couple of thoughts, Randy, but I didn't do justice to that question. There's a lot more that should be said. It's another question I cannot do justice to. Yes?
I got a mic.
Oh, great. Here, send this back. Okay. You broke it.